Well, first, thank you all very much for coming today. I really appreciate y'all being here and coming out. What's that? Oh, I won't have the microphone, he will, so I don't have one. So I'll try and talk louder. So first, thank you all very much for coming out today. It's a great crowd. I really appreciate y'all being here, and I know Mr. Gross does too. I will introduce him in just a second, but just wanted to remind everyone that coming up here in about about 2.5 weeks, is the Tullahoma 4th of July celebration. We're actually doing it on July 3rd down at Fraser McEwen Park. We'll have 2 really good bands. We'll have fireworks. They're going to start around 9:15. So I hope that y'all will make plans to come out and join us. We're going to have a lot of good food vendors. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's a cornhole tournament that day, so if you're a cornhole player, that could be for you. So for today, for Lunch and Learn, I usually tell you about the next upcoming ones, and I will be honest with you, the next 2, I do not have speakers for yet. But I do have one for September, and I'll tell you about him in just a second. But if you know of anybody, my ideas are not always the best. So if you know of anybody who you think might make a good speaker, please come and see me afterwards or give me a call. You can get one of my cards from the desk, or you can call up here at D.W. Wilson. If you know somebody who might have a good topic of general public interest that's not selling anything and it's nonpartisan as far as politics go, we would love to talk to them about possibly doing a Lunch and Learn. So today the one is on Geodes, but the one in September, the guy who's coming for that, well, you're going to know him after today because Mr. Gross is coming back to do that one again. Today he's going to talk about geodes, but in September he's going to talk about orchids. I didn't really know that much about this until I started talking to him a little bit about the intricacies that go into growing, I'm assuming, is a competition level orchids. Is that correct? No?
Just for fun.
Okay. Well, if you are a gardener and you are interested in ornamental flowers and orchids, this is going to be a very good one to come to. But like I said, I am still working on July and August, so keep an ear out for those. I will announce them as soon as I have speakers for it. So I met Mr. Gross probably about 2 months ago. He came in my office and we talked briefly about me coming to an event that he did to talk about some programs, and then this came up and he said, well, you know, he says, I do orchids, and he says, I've got a pretty good geode collection. Well, little did I know, that geode collection is pretty extraordinary. It's not a little one at all. And he's brought some today to share with you. I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him tell you about that here in just a minute. So again, I apologize for starting late, but without further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Richard Gross, your speaker for June.
Yay.
Thank you. First of all, I have several of my former students here. I'm retired. I've been retired for 17 years now from Motlow College. I have several of my students here, and they probably are thinking back to when I was teaching, and they're getting a little uneasy. I want you to know the quiz will not be today. It'll be mailed to you. Okay? So just enjoy your lunch and don't worry about it. Well, today we're talking about geodes, but in a way we're talking about collections too. And I think almost everybody, if they're honest, collects something. Whether it be coins, stamps, matchbook covers, beer steins, whatever, guns, different things, okay? So I'd just like to start out by saying, if you have a collection of some kind, or if you collect anything, raise your hand. Okay, look around, look at there, see? Everybody just about collects something. Okay, good. I collect geodes. Now I started out about, gosh, let me do a little math here. About 60 years ago, and mainly I was collecting mineral specimens. But for the last 40 years now, I've been exclusively collecting geodes. And I go various places to collect them. Now in the slide program, which we're going to start in just a minute, you'll see geodes from all over the world. The only geodes I've collected personally were in the United States at various locations. So when I show you a geode from Morocco, don't get the idea that I've been to Morocco, because I haven't, okay? The other thing is, I saw some people ahead of time that brought some geodes, so I know some of you have geodes. How many people have at least one geode? Raise your hand. Look around. Say, okay, good. We got a good audience. How many people collect geodes? Say you have more than one. Okay, we're dropping down a little bit. Well, I won't even start to tell you how many I have. My wife did show up, but I think she's staying out because she was afraid I was going to tell a joke, probably. But I got an oversized garage that's, you know, I don't have to worry about a tornado coming through. It's not going anywhere. And in the house, I have several displays that almost are like museum-like. So I've got quite a few geodes. Has anybody here ever hunted for geodes? Raise your hand. Good, good, okay. We're going to talk about hunting for geodes a little bit today. Let's start out with, what is a geode? It's very, very, one other thing, with a crowd this size, and we're running a little late, let's hold all our questions till the end, because some people might have to leave, and we don't want to extend that too much. The definition of a geode is very hard, because there's a great diversity, and they're different, and it's hard to pin them down. But generally speaking, one defines a geode as a roughly round rock that is hollow inside and would have some sort of other minerals in them. Crystals usually, but it could be a form we call chalcedony. Now, when I used to give talks to elementary schools, I'd bring something like this along, you know, say it's the 3rd grade. And I say, geodes are neat, aren't they? And I hold this out, isn't this neat? You know, and they go, oh, you know, they'd get all excited and everything, you know. And I'd go, well, what about that then, see? Now, you people in the back can't see much, but this is loaded with sparkly crystals. Then they go insane at that point, see? Okay. But now this one, oh, by the way, this is a Mexican geode, which we will talk about today. This one, you notice, is not really exactly round, and I have some that are further from round than this. But it's still hollow and still has crystals in it. See? This one is from the Keokuk region in Iowa, where Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois come together. We'll be talking a lot about those today also. So we're not too concerned with the geode definition. A question I frequently get is, how do they form? Well, believe me, it's very complicated. There's 2 types. There's igneous, which this Mexican type represents. Not too hard to explain their formation. We're going to talk about this. But when you get to the sedimentary types, or the ones that are formed under sedimentary conditions, it gets very, very complicated quickly. So we're not going to get into these complications. But what I will tell you this, for a geode to form, you must have a cavity in the rock. There must be a void in the rock. So say you have limestone and it has some voids in it. That's where geodes can form. Now, the problem is, there's another term that I almost hate to bring up, but it's called a vug. And that's where you've had a hollow in a rock and solutions of minerals have gotten in there and crystallized. But a vug is not a geode. What's the difference? Well, in order to be a geode, say you have limestone rock, you have to first form a layer of chalcedony quartz, which is a certain kind of quartz, a rind inside that cavity. Because if you don't, when decomposition starts in the rock, the crystals will dissolve also. But if you have that protective rind, then it survives and it becomes a geode. And believe me, that's all I want to say about how they're formed. And believe me, you don't want to hear any more today, because beyond that, it goes way into too much detail. Okay, so we're ready for the slideshow. And what the slideshow is going to show you is the tremendous diversity you find in geodes. They're just, you know, if you collect coins, pretty soon you want to narrow it down, like to maybe United States coins or United States pennies or something. Well, it's almost that way with geodes. It's very, very diverse. And then we're going to talk in the slideshow where you might collect them, both locally and another place that I think you would find interesting. So need the lights out now so these show up better. There we go. Let's see, maybe we can keep these on. Let's see. No, leave it out. Okay, here we go. I'm going to test the pointer in this one, and I'll use my pointer. All right, geodes, I call it nature's hidden treasures. Because remember, the two attributes that a geode has that makes it really something special is, until you crack it open, you really don't know what's inside. That's the hidden treasure part. And then when you crack it open, you're the first person to ever see what's inside that. So that makes it kind of interesting. All right, here we go. Now again, this is only one way that sedimentary geodes can form. It's the least complicated way. You have cavities in the limestone. You get silica, which is quartz, infiltration. That's what usually forms that rind. Of course, sometimes it'll just form a solid nodule, but if it forms the rind, that's great. Then you have solidification. Other mineral solutions get in there because, believe it or not, these rocks are quite porous and solutions can seep in. And then they crystallize. Then weathering over time, it says the limestone is softer, but most limestone is chemically weathered. It doesn't matter. The geodes end up in the soil, and then eventually they roll down and say to the creek, like this is what happens in Woodbury quite a bit. And then when these big horrendous rains come that we've had, it washes the soil away on the side of the creeks and they end up in the creek. Igneous formation is much easier. You have a lava flow, and in this lava flow there's a lot of bubbles, and they become trapped when the lava solidifies, and that provides your cavity, and then from there on out it's about the same. And the way they mine these is and this is Mexico primarily, is very much like you would mine minerals and things. They have a head frame. Whoops, wrong buttons. This is the first time I've used this one. They have a head frame, and they have shafts under the ground. They just go dig them out, usually with picks. Now, examples of sedimentary geodes, or geodes formed by sedimentary processes. Dale Hollow Lake, I only chose this one because unlike a lot of our local geodes, they didn't start out in limestone. They started out in shale, and you can see it better in this picture. So this is the surrounding rock or the shale. This is the geode, and there's your chalcedony layer, so that when the shale weathers away, the geode will survive. This one, boy, this thing's got a hair trigger on it. This one's from Mont Eagle, Woodbury, Tennessee. We're going to say a lot about the Woodbury geodes because they're local and you can get to them. There's a 12-inch one I found, and this is at the now famous Woodbury Highway 70S site, which we'll go into much more detail later. And there's the Whopper. That's the biggest one I've ever found, 20 inches across. And that was from the Woodbury Highway 70S site. And you'll find out what the difference between this is and the normal Woodbury collecting when I get into that. Another Woodbury with iron staining on the crystals. Now, some of the interesting minerals we found in these geodes, particularly at the Highway 70S site, would be dolomite. And this is pink dolomite. We also find the normal tan dolomite. Here's this is the normal, whoops, sorry about that. This is the normal tan dolomite here. And this is a large 1 inch on a side calcite crystal I found in one. By the way, most of these photographs are my own geodes, but we'll get to a point where it's obvious they're not. I won't even tell you about it now. Lincoln County, Kentucky, another example of a sedimentary geode. And here's one of the Moroccans I told you about. If you go to gem and mineral shows, these are quite common for sale because they can sell them fairly inexpensively. And this is a close-up of a Moroccan I have, and this has a rather large quartz crystal in it. And the red color is another mineral called hematite, which is iron oxide, and it's on the outer surface. This one came from Ruck's Pit in Okeechobee, near Okeechobee, Florida. It's a famous location. And these crystals are calcite crystals, golden calcite crystals. Millerite from Hall's Gap, Kentucky is world famous, very rare, very sought after. You can find these on the internet sometimes, say on, well, various sites on the internet. And sometimes the geodes are only like an inch across with millerite in them, and they'll be like $50. I mean, it's just unreal. This is from Wayne County, Utah, and this is celestite. Now, you're not going to remember most of these names, but we're just trying to show you the diversity. Now, in Florida, you have agatized coral geodes. These formed in dead coral heads, which were hollow on the inside. Tampa Bay region is famous, and then along the Withlacoochee River on the Florida-Georgia border is famous. Here's the Tampa Bay. Now remember, these have been cut open. They're not going to look like that when you find them. They're going to look like these dull-looking rocks that I showed you earlier here before we opened them up. That's Tampa Bay, another Tampa Bay. And on a lot of these coral geodes, on the outside, you can see the old coral animal casts. Now, the rest of these are from the Withlacoochee River area on the Florida-Georgia border. Some of these are fairly large. This one's about 8 inches across. This one's fairly rare to have that color and that formation. And you can go up in these areas, and if you scuba dive, you can scuba dive and pick these up off the bottom. Another Withlacoochee. Now, what I consider to be the most fabulous sedimentary geodes, they're called Keokuk's. And there's 3 states and 2 rivers that come together near the town of Keokuk, Iowa. And as it says, nature has endowed this region with an abundance of geodes. And the reason they're important is you can find over 18 different mineral inclusions or secondary minerals in them. I think I have just about every one now that is found. I can't think of any I don't have. And this next slide shows the actual area. See, this is Iowa, Missouri, Illinois. This is the Des Moines River. This is the Mississippi River. And everywhere you see an X, can you people in the back see those little X's? Good, okay. Everywhere you see an X is a good site. And actually, if you took a compass on a map, stuck one point in Keokuk and drew a radius that represented about 75 miles, anywhere in that area is prime. Now, to give you an idea how prime it is, I made up a little story. It's a true story. When I was a youngster in South Florida, I'd go trick-or-treating. And I loved M&Ms, and I always wanted packages of M&Ms. So in those days, the grocery bags were made of paper, and they were about like that big. I'd go out for about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, come back home, and I'd have this thing to where it's just about overflowing. And I'd dump it out on the dining room table, and boy, I just dig through it looking for those M&Ms. And you know, I might find 3 or 4 packs. Well, the analogy is that would be like looking for geodes in somewhere in this area, except not Woodbury, because it's an exception. If the analogy then was I was out trick-or-treating and I came back and it was like Keokuk, I'd dump it out on the table and it'd be almost all M&Ms. That's how common they are up there. It's just unbelievable. And questions at the end, remember? What we're going to do is talk about a festival they have up there of collecting geodes. And if you ever get a chance to go, I highly recommend it. And it's also mentioned on your little sheet there, but we have a better picture of it up here. This is what I consider to be my best Keokuk type. That's what we're going to refer to these as now, Keokuk types, that I've ever found. I found it in Crystal Glen Creek in Hamilton, Illinois. And it's called a snowball, which is considered pretty much the rarest kind of Keokuk geode. And this one was 5 inches across. And the picture really doesn't do it justice. It's just unbelievable. And the chances of finding one of these in most areas around Keokuk is very slim. It just so happens that in the Crystal Glen Creek area, they're a little more common, so I was really lucky to find a good one. Next rarest one of the Keokuks is the diamond dewdrop. This is the whole geode. You don't see much. This is a close-up. Now notice this white is called chalcedony again, but these are the little diamond dewdrops. Now the next slide is an extreme macro close-up of a diamond dewdrop crystal. That crystal is only about a ½ millimeter across. Just barely see it with the naked eye. And it's very rare, that particular form of crystal. St. Francisville, Missouri side, noted for pink calcite. And this is calcite with some citrine quartz. Now, there are some of these that look like this that aren't actually citrine, they're just iron staining. But this one was actually citrine. Whoop, wrong pointer again. This is also more like the citrine staining here. Now, I mentioned this one, the Senat collection. I bought this one from a person who was selling one out of the Senat collection. Stephen Senat wrote the authoritative book on Keokuk geodes called The Fabulous Keokuk Geodes. It's been out of print for many years. You may find a copy through a used book dealer or on the internet. Most copies now are going for about $170, so they're rare in themselves. All right, this is called aragonite. It's a crystal. It's very similar to calcite. In fact, it's what we call a paramorph of calcite. Both calcite and aragonite have the same chemical formula, but they form different crystals. That's called a paramorph. This is sphalerite from Clark County, Missouri. This is your source of zinc. This is zinc sulfide. They use zinc, for example, to galvanize metal to prevent it from rusting. And we have zinc mines right here in Tennessee and a zinc processing plant in Clarksville. Of course, they don't get the zinc from geodes. That'd be a little tough to do. This is iridescent brown calcite. You can't see the iridescence in the slide, but now you can see it. Can you see that in the back? Can you see how that's a little iridescent there? Maybe a little hard to see that far back. But anyway, the iridescence is caused by another mineral that has a thin coating on the calcite. It's called stiptosiderite. I know you're going to remember all these names and immediately know how to spell them, I'm sure. Pink calcite and iridescent calcite. These are all Keokuk type geodes now. This is one that I purchased on the internet, but it wasn't opened. I cracked it open myself out in my garage. And I couldn't understand why my wife came screaming out of the house. I guess I had yelled so loud she thought maybe, I hurt myself or something. But when you see the close-up of these reticulated marcasite crystals, you'll see why. Look at those. Just unbelievable. Rutilated or reticulated marcasite. Red quartz, it's red because it has a hematite iron oxide coating on the crystals. You can find actually pyrite, fool's gold, in Keokuk geodes. The next slide shows a close-up of the crystals. Whoops. There we go. These square crystals. Now they call it fool's gold because it looks gold, but any of the former students I have here from my geology class can tell you that's not the true color of pyrite. Donnie, how do you find the true color of pyrite?
It's been a long time.
Okay.
Scraped it, I don't know.
You remember the streak test?
No.
The streak test where you had the little tiles and you rubbed it against it and powdered the mineral? That gives you the true color. When you streak pyrite, you get black. Now, I can't even start to explain to you why they look gold. But there is a reason. Here's some nice pyrite crystals against a bed of blue chalcedony, which is quartz, of course. Oh, one of the few minerals I didn't have for years was malachite. The only thing is, I actually had it and didn't realize it. And you know why? That malachite cluster there is about a 1/2 millimeter across.
Oh, wow.
And one day and this is a calcite crystal. It's being ingested by another mineral called kaolinite. And so one day I happened to be looking with my hand lens, and I see this little dot of green. And I thought, could that be malachite, you know? So I get a more powerful hand lens, and sure enough, it is. And it took all the camera equipment I have hooked together. And if you're a photographer, you know what I'm talking about. I had 2 extension tubes and a bellows and a macro lens to get that picture. And there's a moral to the story here. Look carefully at your specimens. And this is going to crop up again toward the end of the talk. Here's some Keokuks in their limestone matrix, which illustrates 2 that form side by side could have completely different mineralogies. And here I am at the Jacobs mine just outside of Hamilton, Illinois. This is to show you, unlike around here where you find them mostly in creeks, up there you can dig them right out of the rock matrix. But there are rivers and creeks that the banks, the water gets low and you can go along. Again, I apologize, you people in the back probably can't see this, but that's a geode right there. It's a geode right there, and there's probably a 6 geodes scattered throughout there. That's how common they are. Now, Keokuk Geode Fest. These were taken in 2010, but they have it every year. And you have on your placemats the information for this year's Geode Fest. It's just unbelievable. They take you out with guides on, I think you can get in as many as, let's see, you can do as many as 6 different hunts in 3 days. And they take you to places you wouldn't be able to get on your own. See, that's always a problem, is access when these are on private property. It's hard to get to, but they have arrangements with the landowners. And you can just, well, typically when I used to go up there, I would fill 6 5-gallon buckets that I'd bring back. And I could have gotten more. And usually I only stayed a couple days. And this is a copy of the flyer you have on your placemat. And it talks when it is. It's a great family activity. And I love this picture I took. You see that geode there? Mm-hmm. That's a 5-gallon bucket it's sitting next to. So think about the size of that one. All right, igneous, rather rapidly. Miscellaneous, Mexican, and Brazilian. Baker's Ranch, New Mexico, famous for these beautiful geodes. And you can check the internet. Once a year they have a jamboree where they let people go out and collect on the property. You can collect these. Black Rock Desert, Nevada. Now, some people call these thunder eggs, and that's okay. But if it has a hollow cavity and crystals, it's still considered a geode. If it's solid, it's called a nodule. Here's a Dugway, igneous geode, Dugway, Utah. Dry head agate geode from Montana. Now, Mexico, lots of geodes, but world famous location right in here in Chihuahua State, just north of the city of Chihuahua. It's called the Los Choyos Geode Deposit. It's the only place in the world where those specific kind are found, except now they're found worldwide in collections and museums and everything because they're just famous. You can't collect down there, and you wouldn't want to anyway because it's very dangerous. But at any rock and mineral show, you can find these to purchase. And by the way, there's 2 rock and mineral shows not too far from where we're at now. One is in early October, and I think I have something about it on one of the sheets. It's in Huntsville, of course, and there's one in early December in Franklin, Tennessee. You can find these on the internet. And here's an example. Well, this thing really goes twice. This is an example of a cut open or broken open Mexican coconut from Las Choyas. A lot of different minerals in here. Really pretty. Another Mexican coconut. And this really, it doesn't show up good in the slide, but this is kind of a smoky and amethyst combination. And I found in these particular kinds, if you have the blue agate chalcedony layer, and sometimes you can see this a little bit through the geode, you have a high probability it's going to be amethyst, which is kind of what everybody wants for some reason. That's another one, a little different. It's a close-up. Zacatecas, Mexico is famous for these types of geodes. They're not considered Mexican coconuts, but they're very nice. Another Mexican coconut has smoky or sort of a frosted smoky quartz and then these calcite angel wings. Now this is the one, another one that I cracked open that if my wife had been in the kitchen, she probably would have heard the scream, but she was somewhere else that day. You say, well, what is it? That's calcite, but it's an extremely rare crystal form. When I showed this to the director of the Tellus Museum near Cartersville, Georgia, he wanted it for their collection. And I told him he could have it once I don't need it anymore, which you can guess when that will be. Anyway, could be tomorrow, or if I'm lucky, down the line. How about that, Doc? All right. Now, actually, this would be considered gem grade, but why consider it? Because calcite only has a hardness of 3 on the Mohs scale. It's not really suitable for most jewelry. Brazil is noted for their igneous geodes filled with amethyst. Just, you know, unbelievable. Now, there's another region in Brazil called Três Pinheiros, 3 pines, where you have the Oco type of geode. These are usually very, very small, 1 to 2 inches, but have very unusual secondary minerals in them. But remember, most of these are like in the 3 to 5 millimeter range, the mineral and crystals. And you get 25 millimeters to an inch. You're talking about barely perceptible to the human eye. But again, I rigged up my macro photographic outfit. See, there's 1 inch right across there. Most of these I haven't been able to identify, and neither has anybody else so far, but some of them we can. This is goethite, so iron oxide. I don't know why this thing is doubling. Now, here's an interesting thing. Again, you got to be observant. Be a scientist, be observant. These are easily identifiable. These are goethite crystals. Now, I know you people in the back can't see these. You'll have to take my word for it or get someone up here. You see these little fine hairs on that goethite crystal? How many can see that? Okay, good. Oh, way back there, great. That's another mineral growing on this mineral. I don't know what it is, but it's interesting. What was that Dr. Seuss story? Horton hears a who? Yeah, it's sort of like that. If you look close enough, there's a lot of stuff down there. Here's a, this is girth, whoops. No, that was my fault. And that was my fault. We'll get back here eventually. Here we go. This is goethite. I don't know what this is. Very tiny. But not all Ocos are that tiny. Once in a while you find a big one. That's a 6-inch Oco. That's in my collection. I'm proud of it because it's just so unusual. Now, odds and ends. This photo was taken outside of Woodbury in 1939. This farmer, oh, I see Lyle cropped that. You can't see it, but that's okay. Lyle fixed up the wording on some of these so we could make the images bigger. The farmer's field is back here that he plows, and of course he's constantly plowing up these round rocks he wants to get rid of. Well, one day a few of them cracked open. He saw what was in them. Then he puts them out by the roadside for sale. And if you could see this, the one I wanted was way back here in the field, but you could tell it was a really big one. Now, size. Anybody know what that is? It's a common garden pea. I've actually got some smaller than this, okay? But they do get larger. This is at the Tellus Museum near Cartersville. It's right off I-75. If you've never been there, it's well worth the trip. Not just for minerals and stuff. They have dinosaurs and all kinds of stuff. But this, I'm 6'2", so this is big. How many think that's pretty big? How about this? Now, what's wrong with this picture?
Not wrong.
Debbie Patterson, tell me what's wrong with this picture.
I don't like it because everything's centered. I don't know what's wrong with it.
Kool-Aid face.
What's wrong with it has nothing to do with geology, it has to do with photography.
Okay.
You never want to take a picture of somebody with a pole coming out their head. See? Yeah. Now, you might have thought what was wrong was the crazy face I painted on this guy. Now, I took these off the internet, so I don't want the people to be identifiable. So you think that's big? And oh, I got tired of painting clown faces, so I just blurred their face out. That is an amethyst geode that's approximately 15 feet tall. Most of these were at the Tucson Mineral Show. I wish I could have been there to take the picture. I've never been, but it's on my bucket list. Look at these. These calcites in here are probably the size of footballs or bigger. Okay, now let's get to the hunting part, because I think some of you are interested in hunting your own geodes. This is a geode hunt in Dowelltown, Tennessee, which is just up from Woodbury, but it's the same formation. And these are rockhounds. Oh, not these two. Those are just guard dogs. These are the rockhounds here, okay? Particularly that guy. He's been known to go crazy over geodes. I don't know who he is. This is a geode hunt at St. Francisville, Missouri during a geode fest. And these are all large geodes out here that they found. Whoops. Now, the Woodbury 70S road cut. What's significant about this? Well, I had been hunting geodes, and this is back around 2013. I've been hunting geodes in Woodbury for over 30 years. Where? In creeks, or the Stones River. Okay? The biggest one I ever found was about the size of a volleyball. But when the Department of Transportation decided to 4-lane some of the road through between McMinnville and Woodbury, they had to move a lot of dirt. And when they did, they exposed a lot of geodes. And they were big, like that 20-inch one I showed you. The location, and I tell you this, you can't really hunt there anymore. I'll have a little proviso to that. Oh, that's not my pointer. This is, come on. It's about 4.5 miles from the intersection of Highway 53, which is the one that comes from Tullahoma, and 70S, which goes to McMinnville. That was the site. Okay, here's another example of why you have to observe carefully. I had been collecting the site, probably 5 or 6 times. It was pretty well done. I could have got more, but I didn't need any more. So one day my wife and I were out just joyriding, and I said, hey, let's run by the Woodbury site and see what's happening. And so we just had our regular car. You know, I didn't have my pickup truck. And so we parked over. Now this was taken with a telephoto, so I was back quite a bit. And these are all geodes, okay? All right, so I collected, there were some closer to where I was at, smaller ones, so I collected 3 or 4, threw them in the car, got home, downloaded the picture to my computer, and got real sad. Does anybody know why? Look at that one that I didn't see. That has got to be somewhere between 15 and 20 inches. So I just wasn't very observant, I guess. So always look carefully. Oh, this was the main highway out here between McMinnville and Woodbury. There was a little side road that came up this way. Just it's paved, but you know, it's a small road. I parked my truck, I am literally 10 feet away from stepping out and going and collecting these geodes. That's probably about a 10-incher there. Those are all, and there's many more geodes in there. The Department of Transportation was just piling these things up. Now, this thing's going to drive me crazy. Okay, whether they knew what they were or not, I don't know, but it made for easy collecting. Compared to walking a mile up a creek with a couple of 5-gallon buckets, and then you had to walk back, then you had to walk through a field or something, maybe 200 yards to get to your vehicle. But this is no longer possible. You could dig for these, and that's how I found the whopper, by digging. You'd go along and you take the spiky end of your tool and you hit the soil and go clunk, then you knew you had one and you start digging. Some of the things we found, I mentioned some of these already: regular cream-colored dolomite, smoky quartz. I'd never found smoky quartz in any of the creek geodes. Pink dolomite and chalcopyrite, which is another mineral here. There are diamond dewdrops we found. And a lot of quartz that had double terminations. What that means is the crystal was terminated on both ends. And this is an article I wrote for Rock and Gem in August 2013. I imagined if you were interested enough and wanted one, you would write the company and they'd sell you a back issue. And it tells the whole story about the Highway 70S geodes. I have a copy up front that you can peruse when we're done if you like. Now, the ultimate collector. This fellow had a farm right near where they were doing all this work, and I envisioned him every day when the crew left, he got out there with his front end loader and just loaded up. Now these geodes, I estimate most of them are in the 10 to 15 inch, maybe even bigger range. And I don't know how many are there. There must be hundreds. So. And this is reproduced on your sheet there. There's a couple of good spots to go. See, access is the problem. You don't want to go across private property without permission. And a lot of people in Woodbury shoot first and ask what's going on later. So I'd be real careful. I've had a couple of instances where I was glad my insurance was paid up. And I wasn't even trespassing. You can go to Cannon County High School. I think you can still do this, and that's written down there. On a Saturday or Sunday when they're not busy, walk through their athletic fields and get to Hill Creek. That's a good one. And then up here in the East Fork of the Stone River, there's a spot on Highway 53. It's also called Gasaway Road, where you can park about 4 or 5 cars at once. And that's a good spot. And this is a particularly good spot because there aren't any homes for quite a ways along the creeks. There shouldn't ever be any problem with access. Now, kind of sum this up, or we're getting near the end anyway. The allure of geodes. Remember, when you open a geode, you're the first person to see what's in it. And some of our local geodes go back to 150 million years. So, you know, it goes back. And you never know what's hidden treasures inside. So, imagine about now some of you would like to get up and stretch and everything. But don't, because this is the end. Okay. Now, before we get to questions, I want to mention one other thing. I have brought 3 flats of geodes today. They're small, but we have Woodbury, Indiana, those are sedimentary, and Mexico from various locations. And I thought I was bringing enough till we had an overflow crowd. I might still have just enough where every person might take 2. Now, don't get up yet and don't push and shove, because if they're all gone when you come up, what I'll do is I'll bring another flat and leave them with Lyle, and you can stop by sometime and just tell him, hey, I was here and I didn't get the geodes, and he'll let you pick a couple more. Okay, now we're ready for questions. Any questions? Here we go.
What initiates the cavity in limestone?
That's a good question that I've never really investigated. I just know it does have, various types of limestone do have cavities. And in the shale, it has to do with the way the shale is put together and cracking and things that happen. But physically, chemically, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
And honestly, I've never been interested enough to really root it out. But I might now.
Yeah, but for you house guardians might have a clue as to where the best place to look would be, if those are the conditions and stuff.
Yeah. Well, thing is, when you collect a geode that's weathered out of that, that's long after the fact. It's probably been transported by the creek and everything. So I don't know, like I said, I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, and then those large amethyst geodes that you were showing, they're nothing like round. They're really
Right.
far from round.
Right. The question was, the large amethyst geodes are so far from round, what happened there? The current idea or hypothesis is that those represent ancient tree roots that are very large, or possibly the trunks that were buried and then the organic material left, and it left a hollow there. Yeah. Yes.
What's the best way to open it to preserve the inside?
Very good. How do you open a geode to preserve? I'm going to get to you next, young lady, because you earlier had a question. The best way to open a geode, well, there's two general ways to do it: to crack it open somehow, which I'll tell you how, or to slice it with a diamond blade, or a tile saw. If you have a small one, you can use a tile saw. The cracking I recommend for Keokuk geodes, and the reason is a lapidary saw, unless you're just using water, which I don't think you usually use with lapidary saws, may have a solvent or something, or at least you're going to try to clean it up afterwards, and a lot of those secondaries are very delicate, and they're going to just be lost. So now, on the Mexican coconuts, lapidary saws are fine, Oh, there you are. Oh, okay, you're still there. I had another question there. I'll get right to you. You're next, then you're next. The cracking, you can just protect your hand and your eyes, crack it with a hammer. When I do that, I usually get half that's good and the rest is little pieces, so I don't like to do that. You could take a chisel and carefully score around the whole thing and then give it a good hit. What I like, and of course not everybody's going to do this, but I've had so many, it's paid for itself. I purchased on the internet used for like $120 what's called a soil pipe cutter. Anybody know what that is? Plumbers used them, and still use them somewhat, to crack that iron pipe that they have to use sometimes. In fact, there was a picture, a drawing of it in the next to last slide, or 2 slides back. It's like a gigantic pair of pliers, and then on one end it's got a chain that has little carbide wheels in it, and on the other side it has a little hook where you can then hook the chain. And what you do is you open the arms, you judge your geode, you put the chain around it, and then you hook it in there. So now this is grasped by this chain that has little carbide wheels, and carbide is very hard. You just start pushing down, pop. And usually it pops it real nice, just in half. And this is not a commercial, I'm just saying this. If you want to see it done, I don't do gem shows except once a year. I do the Huntsville show, and that's what I do mostly, is I'm cracking geodes. And I really enjoy doing it because the kids and a lot of the adults really get a kick out of it. Now, you were next, young lady. What was your question? Loud.
Can the geodes form after you crack it open?
No. The question was, can the geode form after you crack it open? The answer is no, unless you do something artificial to it, which I've done. I've taken a half of a geode that had practically nothing in it and made up a solution of certain chemicals and poured them in there, and when they evaporated, it left crystals. See? That's called a fake geode. All the way in the back. Real loud.
How do geodes get to place to place?
Would somebody repeat that back there?
get from place to place.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, like if there's a river or a creek running by where they are, eventually they wash out and fall in the creek, and if they're not too big, they'll be transported by the creek.
There's some geodes out of the South Bank of this river. Seen got any geodes?
Yeah, I've collected a few of those, and also on Tim's Ford Lake. I've never found anything good, but I did have a friend that found one on Tim's that was pretty nice, yeah. I'd say your best bet is Woodbury because of the numbers you can find.
You might point out the difference between a collector and an accumulator, because a lot of people that maybe think they're collectors are really just accumulating.
I'm sorry, I can't go there. If my wife was here, she'd say I resembled that remark.
Repeat the question.
Oh, the question was the difference between a collector, and she was being polite, she meant hoarder, but she said accumulator. Other questions? Okay, well.
She's got one more.
Oh, one more, okay, loud.
Hunting, how do you tell a rock or a geode?
Okay, good question. And there's a corollary to that question we're going to also talk about. By the way, an interesting little thing, once you crack them, and you want to get them back together, I always put a mark, a line across there. If you line them up, well, oh, there's the mark. Then they go back together. Okay. Well, the way you tell generally is, hopefully you know you're in an area where geodes occur. Okay. Then you look for something that's roughly round and bumpy. Now, if you're doing Woodbury, none of these are really quite large enough to see, but let's see. You see how they're kind of bumpy like that? That's one way of telling. Now, the real question I have to think about all the time is how do you know if they're hollow or not? Believe me, you do not want to carry 2 5-gallon buckets a mile back from the creek and they're all solids. You don't want to do that. Well, I do what's called the heft test. See? And I've done enough of them, I can usually tell. But if you're in a creek, there's nothing to keep you from cracking it with your hammer carefully and finding out that way. Now, if you're at one of the commercial mines in Keokuk, they tell you not to crack them on the site. Okay? Good enough? All right. Other questions? Okay, now, as I said, I think I mentioned this, I brought geodes, and I think I have enough for everybody to take 2. But if we run out, don't panic. I'll within the next 2 days, what is today, Wednesday? Well, let's say by next Monday, I will have some more here. You just tell Lyle that you didn't get one. Oh, I forgot one other important thing. If you're interested in just general things about geodes, this book is excellent. It covers all kinds, just about every kind. It's by Brad Cross and June Culp Zeitner. It's called Geodes, Nature's Treasure. You can usually find it on the internet for about $20.
I just have a quick question about, you said there was pyrite occasionally in.
Yeah.
We found a lot of just the pyrite balls, so how, they
Yeah.
have the little shell, so how.
I know what you're talking about. You found them down around.
We were more around Macburn, Frank Ewing.
Yeah, right. I was trying to think of the other name down there. I can't think of it now. Yeah, what those are pyrite nodules. They are not geodes.
Right, okay.
And usually when you find them, they don't look gold on the outside. They look kind of brownish red. But if you'll bust one open, they will be gold on the inside. And the reason is iron sulfide oxidizes to iron oxide. What is iron oxide? It's rust. So the outside, exposed to the air, rust, looks that way. Yeah, right.
But it has that shell, and I know they're not geodes, they're not hollow.
Right. They're nodules.
Right, okay.
How do you identify what's the inclusions? I mean, red, it looks sort of red, or looks pink, or whatever.
Well, you just do that by studying it, and reading books and magazines and going to rock and gem clubs, and you learn your minerals.
Anybody do X-ray spectroscopy?
Usually, the stuff that's found in geodes is common enough where you don't have to do that. But you could do it, sure. Okay, now I know some of you are on a time problem, so if you have to leave, it's not considered rude. Go ahead, but I'll stick around if anybody else has questions. All right, well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.